Sometimes you might wonder if you're really living or just going through the motions. It was like every morning was the same, with no clear reason for doing it, like a pattern that never ends. Have you ever felt like nothing makes sense anymore? There are times when the things that kept us alive fall apart, and everything seems to lose its worth. The question then comes up, why are we here? What is the point of our lives? Even though they're hard to answer, we've all had them happen to us. This is what happened to Lev Tolstoy, who was one of the best writers in history. He had a lot of money, a beautiful family, and the image of being a great writer. But when he was 50, he saw it all fall apart. How could a man who had lived a full life all of a sudden feel empty? Just what was wrong with Tolstoy? He seemed to have everything he needed. Now, let's talk about what made Tolstoy doubt his own life and how he dealt with this. As someone who is also trying to figure out the big questions in life, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about this process of self-discovery and change. We're all on the same path to find meaning and peace. Tolstoy had a strong doubt about faith from a very young age. When he was young, he lost both parents. This made him feel abandoned, and it got worse over time. He didn't understand the Christian faith or its rules and demands. He also thought the church was a place where lies were spread. He said that religious belief that is only kept up by social pressure falls apart when we are faced with the facts and events that life gives us. This negative point of view came from having a sad childhood and being wary of the big bad world. As a young man, Tolstoy lived through the terrible Crimean War. It left deep scars on his soul and made him even less tolerant of violence and power. He also became more convinced that nothing in the world made sense in the long run during this time of strife. He spent all of his time writing when he got back to Russia and became one of the most famous writers of his time. He got married to Sofia, had a big family and a wealthy farm. But when he was 50, he had an existential crisis. He no longer felt like his life had any value. All of his accomplishments seemed pointless when he thought about the questions that kept coming back to him. He was in pain all the time and turned to sleep to escape the things that were running through his mind. Tolstoy wrote in a confession that he even thought about death as a way out during one of his deepest periods of reflection. He felt nihilism and asked himself, what is the point of living if death is inevitable? What good is fame or money if it will all go away? These thoughts made him feel completely lost, but he didn't give up. Instead, he chose a different path, the search for answers. He chose to look into all the ways he could find value in his life. During this trip, a tale caught his attention. This story would come to represent what he was going through. In the story, a man gets stuck in a pit where death is waiting. A dragon waits for him at the bottom, and he holds onto a branch to try to avoid the end. He is feeling very sad when he sees something strange, honey drops falling on his hands. This is a brief moment of happiness in the middle of his pain. This action was a metaphor for the little pleasures in life that, even though they only last a moment, take your mind off of your pain. Tolstoy saw this picture as a metaphor for life itself. Between the constant fear of death and the search for small moments of happiness. The beliefs of the time didn't seem to fill the void for him, so he looked elsewhere. For example, science seemed sad to him because it explained how life works, but didn't offer any comforting ideas about what life is all about. Tolstoy thought about this for a long time and came up with 4 main ways that people deal with the absurdities of life. Strangely, One of them was the complete rejection of this ridiculous truth. They didn't think about eternal questions and kept living. There is no way around this comparison to the philosopher Albert Camus. Both of them saw life as fundamentally absurd and thought that the only way to find meaning was to face this absurdity with courage and persistence. So what seems to be the answer to some of life's big questions? What does it matter if you can't explain everything? What if finding the point of life seems impossible? In times of question, Tolstoy knew that stopping and living in the present moment could be the best thing to do. A cup of coffee with his wife, a short break from all the questions. But he also knew that this wasn't the only way to solve the problem. How could a man who is smart and eager just give up and not know anything? The search for answers is like a light that is hard to put out when the mind is at full throttle. This is especially true when life is full of loss and pain. Nihilism will always win out. At some point, you can't keep feeling like nothing makes sense. And the greatest doubt comes up when the absurdity of life is no longer enough to explain things. Tolstoy knew that giving up and not caring about anything did not lead to real happiness, even though he knew that many people did this. For him, the key wasn't denying the problem, but facing it head-on, over and over again. Then he watched those who tried to find the pleasure in the empty space. They used money, relationships, and fun times to avoid thinking about existential problems. They looked for something to take their minds off of the pain, because they thought that happiness could help. But Tolstoy didn't believe this to be true. Even though pleasure made him happy for a while, he knew it couldn't heal his deep sadness. It was like the honey in the story of the man at the well. It was sweet for a short time, but it couldn't change what was going to happen. Tolstoy found a third group, people who felt like life was pointless and couldn't see any reason to keep going, but were in so much pain that they thought about ending their lives. Even though he felt like going this way, he never gave up on death as a way to find meaning in his life. Tolstoy thought that giving up did not answer life's most important question. Also, remember this important thing: don't give up when things get hard. Don't let nothingness take over your life. Even if the answers don't seem to be coming, keep going. Tolstoy finally came up with a fourth group, people who were crippled by the fact that they knew life was pointless and death was inevitable. They could feel the pain, but couldn't do anything about it. They weren't fighting or having fun. Instead, they were stuck and couldn't either accept life or give it up. They didn't care about anything in particular and didn't have the strength to look for an answer. It wasn't a choice to keep living, it was more of an automatic reaction, like mindless survival. It was clear to Tolstoy that a lot of people were stuck in a state of mental exhaustion that made it impossible for them to move forward or even think about the next step. They knew that life was painful and pointless, but they did nothing about it. Instead, they stayed stuck in inaction, with no hope of finding meaning or a solution. He thought this was the worst way to live, not changing or making progress, just putting up with pain. Tolstoy was always looking for answers, so he studied many different religions and theories and paid close attention to the people and things around him. But it was when he looked at the peasants that his trip took a big turn for the better. The peasants had an unwavering faith in God, which seemed to give them amazing power and resilience despite the terrible things that happened to them. In contrast to the questions and pain that Tolstoy felt in his own life, this faith was so simple but so deep. He was wealthy, well known, and had a lot of writing success. But it didn't seem to make him happy. Logic and reason, which had once seemed like they could help, only made him feel more empty. In his books, like Anna Karenina, characters like Levin showed the same desperate search for meaning, which often seemed to go on forever and never end. After seeing the faith of the people, Tolstoy changed the way he thought about his own problems. He understood that logic alone couldn't explain everything, and that maybe life needed something more than logic to make sense. At that point, faith, which he had always thought was illogical, started to look like a way to go beyond the limits of the real world. Tolstoy eventually realized that faith was the key to overcoming suffering and giving life a meaning beyond this short life. His rational mind fought this idea. He had a reason to keep going that reason alone could not give him. He believed in something bigger than the physical world. For me, faith stopped being just an idea and turned into a real tool for change. This new knowledge changed Tolstoy's life in a big way. Eventually, he understood that the real point of life wasn't to get rich or smart, but to be kind, humble, and helpful to others. After seeing this, he gave up the extravagant life of the nobility and became more like the simple life of the peasants. But his newfound faith did not lead him to the Russian Orthodox Church. He thought that it was corrupt and not at all like what Christ taught. Tolstoy instead focused on studying the Gospels directly. He found a moral guide in the Sermon on the Mount that helped him change the way he saw the world. This change showed up not only in his personal life, but also in his work. It gave his works a new direction, filled with a deep search for truth and humanity. In a confession, Tolstoy wrote about the painful and honest fight he had with himself as he tried to figure out what his life was all about. His family, especially his wife Sophia, became very angry with him because of this mental change. She didn't understand the changes he was making in his life and was strongly against his choice to give up his money and the rights to his books. The couple's arguments got worse, which caused Tolstoy a lot of mental pain. Because of problems with himself and his family, he made a big choice in 1910. He ran away from home when he was 82 years old to find an easier life without family duties or the rules of society. He left his home in Yasnaya Polyana in the middle of a cold October night, taking only his doctor and his daughter Alexandra with him. His health was already weak, so the trip was too much for it to handle. Tolstoy got very sick on the trip and died at the Astapovo train station on November 20, 1910. He was far from his home and the problems that came with it. His last days, on the other hand, were marked by an unexpected peace. This may have been because he had spent his whole life looking for answers to his worries. Tolstoy's impact went beyond his own life, even though his death was marked by family and personal problems. His influence was felt by many people who read his writing and thought about his ideas and philosophical questions. An example for many, the crisis he went through showed that even in the worst situations, it is possible to start over and change your fate. During his journey, Tolstoy found that the answer to his problems was something easy but deep, helping other people and being spiritual. Through his never-ending search for meaning, he gained a new outlook on life. This change not only affected his own life, but also the lives of millions of fans around the world, encouraging them to be more humble and kind. Tolstoy shows us that the search for meaning is a very human journey that is full of questions and turns. He turned to faith to change his life, even when he was going through a lot of pain. and existential crisis. His story is a powerful reminder that there is always room for growth and the discovery of a bigger purpose, even when things are hard. Life's big questions can sometimes be answered by something easy that changes everything. We can all find our own way to peace of mind, just like Tolstoy did. If this Tolstoy story moved you in any way, please like the movie and share it with someone else who needs to think about what life is all about. If you want to see more movies like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Join us as we learn and discover new things.